about lifestyle and career fit. We started earlier this episode by saying when we think W-2 versus 1099, it's, do you want autonomy and flexibility, or do you want job security and income stability? I'm not actually sure if it has to be one or the other. I think you can get autonomy, flexibility, and security from 1099 work.
I think some people prefer W-2. Maybe because of fear, because they haven't had to deal with their taxes, doing their taxes themselves, or keeping track of expenses. So it's easier. It is definitely easier, just having a W-2 salary coming in every month and you just spend it and the taxes are withheld from you. You just have to do returns at the end of the year. But it's much easier. So I think some people prefer that, but I do find it, I mean, it depends on what kind of W-2 you're doing. I do find full-time W-2 jobs as 5 days a week causing burnout. If you can manage to have a part-time W-2 job, but then part-time wouldn't pay for benefits too. So, it's hard to get to have a full-time W-2 job and add 1099s on the side. And some people, I think they can manage it, but especially, I think it seems like you did in the beginning. You had a full-time W-2 job and a little bit of 1099, and then you switched to fully 1099.
Yeah, that's how I did it. I started off by doing some IME work on the side as well as some disability work. Honestly, I started doing, and this sounds so sad, but I started doing 1099 work because my W-2 income I didn't think was enough for New York City, which is crazy, right? Like we work so hard and we get to where we are, but at the end of it, after taxes, which New York state taxes are huge, and that's why we say talk to a CPA in your own state, because Charlotte's in California, I'm in New York, or New York City specifically. Like we have the worst taxes, I think, throughout the country. It might be better for you where you are. But I started doing 1099 work just to supplement my income. And then I realized, wait a second. If I was to do as much work as I'm doing in my W-2 job, just doing 1099 work, like I started calculating, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could make so much more money. And then granted, I'm not going to work like a dog doing 1099 work, but for what I was willing to do, which what I really am doing now is I'm definitely working 3 weeks out of the month. Some months I'll work 4 weeks, but I definitely have work for 3 weeks out of the month. I try not to do weekends. I try not to do call, and I'm still out earning my W-2 income, right? There's always the capability to work more, but the good news is if you're working more, you will make more. And you can't say that for salaried employment.
That's right. Yeah, I think some really need the W-2. They need the PTO, they need the sick leave, they need the health insurance. So it's not for everyone, I have to agree. And some W-2 jobs, they're very strict with the sick leave, also with the PTO. You cannot take certain PTOs during the certain time, like Christmas or New Year's or during summertime. So when you have those kind of restrictions on when you can even be off, especially you have school kids and you have other obligations, life obligations, personal obligations, it's very difficult. It takes the autonomy away.
I agree with you. I think it definitely takes the autonomy away from physicians, but more than that, I think it can be demoralizing in some ways because someone is controlling basically everything you're doing. And I understand that happens in like every sector. When you have a boss and you have administration over you, you feel like you have very little control in what you can do, very little autonomy. We keep coming back to that word autonomy, but I think when you're a physician and you've gone through so much training and you want to practice medicine a certain way, I think 1099 work is beneficial because there's no politics, there's no administrators that you have to really answer to. If someone is talking to you a certain way, you can decide that that's not a contract you want anymore. Whereas in W-2 work, you're kind of stuck. You don't have that option. If they want you to do certain trainings, they want you to do certain modules when you're 1099, you can always say, "Hey, is this compensated?" I'm not going to do any work that's not compensated. I Doesn't happen in W-2, unfortunately.
Right, exactly. And the other thing that I noticed, there are jobs that first when you want to sign up for them, they even part-time, they say W-2. So you have to ask, actually, you have to say, no, I would like a 1099 type of work. So make sure you ask to do a 1099, especially if you're moving into a part-time position. Really, there's no benefit of doing a W-2 because if you're not getting the PTO, you're not getting the health insurance, you're not getting the benefits of a full-time employee. So then and then your taxes are high. So really there's no benefit of doing part-time W-2. So you really need to ask to be 1099 so you can have the tax deductions, the tax benefit from a 1099 work.
Yeah, I think some companies do that. They do that to decrease their own tax burden, unfortunately. They don't do 1099 work. Your W-2, it doesn't matter if you're working two times a month, 5 times a month, 20 times a month, they don't care. Ultimately, to me, that isn't worthwhile because if you're not giving me the benefits and you're taking my taxes, I don't really see the point. Let's just touch briefly on like the different paths that we talked about. So, for example, I was doing some W-2 work and then I started doing 1099 work on the side, and I felt that to be really, really stable. Um, However, there are doctors who decide that they don't want to do just W-2 work and just do 1099 work with a bunch of clients. I don't think there's one way to go about it. I think there's multiple ways to get into this work. But you just have to kind of understand what is required from you. And it is a lot of work. And I think initially it feels really daunting, but we're very smart and we can teach ourselves. Many physicians, even after they've done 1099 work, they do go back to W-2. And I think people do make that move as well. But I think it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be a combination of both if you can handle it. Again, the positive from that, the pro per se, is that you do have a little bit of a backup plan if your W-2 job is not going the way you want it to go. And I think because of that, every physician should look into double or 1099 work. One thing I think we didn't touch on here that is important to talk about is credentialing. I know you and I have gone through every time you credential for a hospital system, it can take 30 to 90 days. And when you are a W-2 employee, you do that first time when you start. But when you're doing 1099 work, you are doing that every time you're in a new hospital. So plan for that gaps in income potential because I didn't. There was like a 3 month period where I wasn't making any money. I didn't even realize that credentialing would take such a strong would take such a long period of time. But again, I think because I don't have multiple dependents, I don't have small children, I was able to make it work. But if you are someone with a family, um, and if your spouse is not working per se, uh, just plan for that so you're not stuck without any income coming in.
Have an income for 6 months, because sometimes some hospitals take much, much longer. And especially if you're a new grad and going to a new state and you have to get a state license before even the credentialing at the hospital, really plan for 6 months of having 6 months of income because it may take up to 6 months, really.
Yeah, it can take a period of time. And if you're working with a locums company, I think they do handle some of that credentialing for you. But a lot of the times you're stuck doing it yourself. And then there's also the state licensure, right? If you're planning to travel, a lot of the time locums company will handle that for you, but you might be stuck doing it on your own. Um, yeah, so I mean, I think like my final thoughts on this are I think 1099 work is very feasible. I have said this several times. I think being a full-time 1099 independent contractor has saved my mental health and it's given me career longevity where when I was a W-2 employee, I was every day I was looking looking for a way out of medicine and wanting to leave. But once I started doing 1099 work, I realized that one, I have my flexibility back. I have my autonomy back. I'm getting paid what I'm worth. And I have control over my schedule, which was huge. I did not go through this much schooling to work under someone else, I think. I mean, listen, you do obviously have employers if you're working a 1099 job, but you have the flexibility to walk away whenever you want. And I think to me, that's very helpful and that's very important. I will say, as a caveat and as something for people to think about, is if you are going down this route, it's not all, sunshine and butterflies and rainbows. So there are some cons, most of which we've discussed. But I think your first step should be to talk to an accountant, especially someone who has worked with doctors before. Um, Talk to a financial advisor if you have one, but that's less necessary. I think an accountant is very necessary, and start trying to get quotes on malpractice insurance. I wish I had done that earlier. I finally found that company that works well for me. And again, we'll put them in the captions. But these are all things to think about. And then also think about um, healthcare insurance, because you don't want to not have insurance. There are families that have 210 independent contractor parents and children. And I think there's like insurance shares that people jump on. There's like healthcare marketplace. So there's a wide variety of options, but don't just quit your W-2 job and try to jump into 1099 without doing any research at all. I think it's worth it, but like Shala said, it does require a lot more work.
And then in terms of LLC or S corp, there are companies online. I use my corporation, but there are lots of companies online that they can make it for you. Basically, take all the steps and the paperwork, and you just have to sign. I mean, make sure you understand what's going on, and then they will file for corporation or LLC on your behalf. It's not a hard process. And then afterwards, once you have the EIN number, you can just take that with articles of incorporation and open a bank account under the business name. So all the money goes into the bank account. And that's how you can keep track of your expenses. And then there are lots of apps, for example, for bookkeeping. So you can do those. You can hire a bookkeeper even to do your monthly bookkeeping, or you can do it by yourself. Like at first, when I just had one contract, I did my bookkeeping on an Excel sheet myself. I would keep track of the money coming in and the money going out, all the expenses. And then as I had more contracts and more work, then I basically hired the bookkeeping app QuickBooks. And then at the end of the year, I also hire a bookkeeper to clean it up and reconcile everything and make sure that everything is streamlined and correct.
So there's multiple ways to do this, but the important thing is you need an accountant and you need a way to do your bookkeeping. I think that's the two big things. So because like Shala mentioned, when you set up your LLC and S corp, which I had a lawyer do mine, it was a few $100. I mean, I could have done it on my own, but I was working a W-2 job at the time. I didn't have the time. So he set it up, he submitted it to the IRS. I got an EIN number, and now whenever I get paid, it goes directly to my EIN, which is very, very helpful. But yes, you can hire a bookkeeper. You can spend as much or as little money as you want. It really depends on how your business is growing.
But do your research. As you said, there are even books, on how to do this. So make sure you do your research and you can compare and see which one works best for you. Again, it doesn't need to be, I'm only doing W-2 or I'm only doing 1099. If you think a hybrid model works for you, then you can do a hybrid model. Also take into account like your spouses, whether your spouse is a W-2 and you're a 1099, and you can use the health benefits from your spouse. That's, I think, a plus. There are multiple options and models that you can do this, but the most important one is that you do your research, talk to people who did it, and then also look at the job that you're interested in and ask them. They may not offer 1099, for example. So you need to see what they're offering you and whether you're happy with that offer. I would say, you have more negotiating power with 1099, as Santoshi said. So make sure that you negotiate and hire a lawyer like resolve.com, for example. You negotiate your contract.
Yes, because you don't know what rates to ask in the beginning, I think. So, having a lawyer like from Resolve is helpful. There's also websites, we can link them off call. It actually does a pretty good job outlining the proper pay across the country. And how they're doing that is physicians are just submitting their information and they're collecting that, which is really, really helpful. Um, but talk to people. I mean, I get messages all the time about 1099 work where I have residents, attendings reach out to me and ask, how are you setting your rates? What is your rate? I think the most important thing is talking to people who are doing it so you don't sell yourself short. Because trust me, there are people who will want to pay pennies, and there are doctors who will accept pennies. So that doesn't help any of us. So definitely negotiate. And I think one other last important thing is before you venture into 1099, and if you have a W-2 job, please make sure your W-2 job is allowing 1099 work. We don't want anyone to get into
Right.
trouble, because there are some jobs that have those clauses where you're not allowed to work other jobs while you're with them, which frankly I think is BS, because who are they to control what you do on your free time? But some jobs do have that, so just make sure you're being very mindful of those things.
Yeah, make sure you review your contract for the W-2 job and all the non-compete clauses. So make sure you do that, you do your research. And also maybe we should tell the audience what kind of jobs that are kind of mostly 1099. Santoshi, you probably have
Yeah.
more experience in the type of jobs that are 1099. I do have a few, but my line of work is very specific, which is intraoperative neuromonitoring. But you probably have even broader experience with the 1099 jobs.
Sure. I think when it comes to 1099 work, the options are actually pretty endless. And we have a few episodes where we talk about some non clinical work. We talk about what to look for in contracts. We talk about, you know, different things that physicians are doing. But the jobs that are 1099 jobs that are most popular are telehealth. I will tell you, if you are going to join a telehealth company, make sure you're talking to people who work for that company. Not all telehealth companies will pay you fairly, let's just say. So, telehealth, a lot of people are doing as 1099 work, a locum, travel locums, or local locums. For me, I've gotten very lucky and I have per diem contracts within New York City. I've gotten that without a recruiter, just through connections. And again, I've been very lucky with that. If you do want to use a recruiter, you certainly can. There are so many locums agencies, but I think if you find a good recruiter who is willing to work with you and get you the rates that you want, keep them. So yeah, so there's travel locums, there's local locums, there's telehealth roles, there's non-clinical work. You can be an expert witness, you can do disability reviews, you can do IME works, which is independent medical exams. So there's a whole bunch of non-clinical stuff that you can do. 1099. I've heard of people doing medical writing as well, medical editing, medical writing for different medical journals. I think that also is 1099 work. Just if you want to leave medicine fully, if you have a separate talent, like let's say you're very good at painting or you like writing, you can do something totally separate from medicine. You can go author a book, you can sell your paintings, you can do a wide variety of things. So really, it's endless. But I think the specific ones that I've seen most people do are telehealth, travel locums, or local locums, and non-clinical work. And I can't believe I forget this. So I'm EEG trained, so I also read EEGs remotely for different hospitals, and that's a little harder to get, but I've gotten that through connections. Again, you just have to talk to people, and I know a few other friends who also do that. So if you have any other skills like that, like if you're a radiologist, if you can read EEGs, if you can do IOM, and you can do that remotely, that's also a skill that you can use to get 1099 work.
The only other things that I would add is like physician advisory work, for hospitals or consulting. That those are usually typically 1099 unless you completely work as some sort of a leader in the company. Then that would probably change into a W-2 full-time position. But in the beginning, usually they want advisors or even medical device companies. Typically in the beginning, they would want, they do a 1099 kind of advisory role for physicians.
Yeah, a lot of pharma companies, a lot of there's a lot of consulting companies that will reach out to you. For me, they usually reach out to me via LinkedIn. They're not all credible, so make sure you do your research. but there are a few that I trust, and I've done work with them. And the best part is you can set your rate. There are many options. Those are a little more difficult to get, but like I said, I've gotten a lot of visibility through LinkedIn. So if you are interested in doing that, I think LinkedIn is a good way to go. But absolutely, you're right, Shala. That's also another way.
So I think that's it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in to Be Empowered, the podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't hesitate to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Stay strong, stay empowered, and we'll see you next time.